Hey guys, Jared Rogaspi, your local real estate superhero here. Welcome back to another week of me answering all of your random questions, whether they be real estate related or even if you guys just want to see how I'm doing, I'll answer those questions too. No, so moral of the story is I got another handful of questions and I'm going to try to give my best answers to those ones. If this helps anyone, then that's great, and that's what the goal is. So let's get started. Question number 1 comes from Evan. How are your properties assigned, and is your firm large or small? Do you deal with family homes or more lavish properties? So, this is actually more of, I guess, a personal question, mainly just because I can only really speak for me and the firm that I work for. But I know that the brokerage I work for over at Keller Williams, basically the properties aren't really assigned to us. As independent contractors, real estate agents tend to have to go out and find their own clients. That being said, it does get into a little bit of a gray area because while the IRS and most people in the world look at real estate agents like they're independent contractors, there is the real estate commissioner that works for the governor who actually says that we're employees of the broker. And so we work at a brokerage, and technically all of our clients that we're under contract with at the time is technically under contract with the brokerage, not with us. That being said, the way that we get our clients still ultimately lands with us. And even though, let's say, I change brokerages suddenly, if I go from, we'll just say, Keller Williams to RE/MAX, the clients that I have at the time will stay with Keller Williams. But if I had someone that I helped a year ago and then I go to RE/MAX now, a month later, if those people from a year ago need help, then they'll still probably come to me. So it's definitely a little bit of a gray area there, but hopefully that gives a little bit more context. We're independent contractors by a lot of people's standards, and so we basically have to go out there and prospect for our own clientele and build our own relationships with people. Sometimes someone will call in and say, hey, I just have questions, and I Googled the closest brokerage, and hopefully you guys can help, and then that just depends on who's available in order to give a hand. I've had those handed to me, and I've seen those handed to other people, but they don't happen nearly as often as just going out there and talking to people and build up relationships, because that's what our job is. We're in the people business, and so if we're not going out there and building up those relationships with other people, then we're not doing our business justice. So that being said, beyond that, I know that I personally will work with most homes. One really cool aspect is that I work over at the Keller Williams branch over in Norco, and we actually just recently got included as a luxury market brokerage over here in California. And that's because in Norco we deal a lot with equestrian property or horse property, and those tend to be really large, lavish type of properties themselves. So I can work with those properties, and then ultimately I work a lot with first-time home buyers, which is why you hear me talk so much about down payment assistance and things like that. So I go over a wide variety of people on the spectrum. I will help you if you're trying to buy a $300,000 home here in Southern California, if you're going to try to buy or sell $1 million home here in Southern California. I have one person who may want to move over into a place where the average home price is like $150,000, and that's not going to be fantastic for me, but it's fantastic for them, and that's what matters most. So kind of answers your question a little bit, but it's just sort of dependent on the person. Like I said, as far as the brokerage assigning people, it's more of a people business, and so it's on us to be able to find them, not the other way around. And as far as me as an individual, I'm here to help people, and that's my way of doing my business justice. What are the benefits of purchasing versus renting? Another question could be for those who are buying a second house, what are the benefits of having an investment property? So I like this question a lot because it's something that I have to talk to a lot of people about. If you're thinking about renting right now, genuinely consider whether or not you have the ability to buy. And if you're not 100% certain, go talk to an agent, because it costs you zero money to do that. All it is a consultation. Either me or someone else will go over with you a little bit of what's going on in your life, maybe have you talk to a lender if we get far enough, and then we'll decide from there whether or not it's smarter for you to be able to buy a home versus rent a home. And when I say we'll decide, I don't mean me and the lender. I mean you and me as your agent. We sit down together and we weigh our options. I'm talking to someone right now who thinks that they'll probably end up renting, but we're going to try to find out whether or not it's a smarter idea to buy. And it's just a matter of seeing what our options are. A lot of people who talk to me slowly realize the fact that I'm not very good at making people buy things that they don't want. My goal is to be here when you need me, and then to make sure that you know what your options are at all times. And if you see your options and you still decide that you want to rent, then fantastic. But if you don't know your options and you just think that you have to rent because you don't have a choice, find out what your options are. Because there aren't so many benefits to renting. One big one, and I'll play devil's advocate here, one big perk to renting is if you have to move a lot, or if you don't like where you're at, then renting a property makes it way easier to move suddenly or move long distances. So definitely keep that in mind if you have to travel a lot for work, or if you find yourself going from place to place to place and buying a home would suddenly nail you down. Then it's not the best idea, because it's a lot harder to sell your property than to give in a 30 days notice and say, hey, I'm moving out next month. That being said, and this comes from personal experience, one of the only reasons why I was able to move out of the town that I used to be living in to the town that I live in now, despite the big change in how much the cost of living is because I owned my home in the other town, and I built up equity, and that was able to give me the funds in excess, the net funds in my pocket, to be able to afford to move down here. So definitely contemplate whether or not you move a lot, because if you're just moving one time, then as much as it would be a little bit more stressful, the outcome may outweigh that stress. And the entire purpose of me representing you or having another agent represent you is to help relieve a lot of that stress. So find an agent that's going to do you right, and they'll be able to help you along the way, and hopefully a lot of that stress won't overwhelm you. And that way, let's say you do want to move somewhere completely different, buy your home. And if you're planning on moving in 5 years, then build up that equity, and that way in 5 years you can sell it, keep some of that in order to buy you another home somewhere else, but then also have that to help you with the move. That's what I did. It's obviously more of a biased perspective, mainly because I did it, but I can say that I did do it. And so I recommend doing that for people who need to make big changes in their life. It's a great way to build up equity. And the only reason I can see to want to rent is primarily because if you move a lot, then that stress is just a constant if you keep buying homes. And that I don't see as being a smart idea. So if you have to move a lot, or if you think that you're going to have to constantly keep moving, then really genuinely consider renting. But otherwise, definitely figure out whether or not you can buy. And bottom line, find out what your options are. As far as investment properties go, it gets into a kind of a different situation entirely, and it's one that I highly recommend. Having investment properties is one of the few ways that I actually highly recommend people get what's called passive income. And passive income, for those of you who may not know, is essentially just having different sources of income that don't have you playing an active role in generating it anymore. And so having passive income through the form of real estate is essentially you having people live in your home, even if you have a separate home that you're renting out, and they pay you in order to live there, and they pay your mortgage along the way. I've seen people do crazy things in order to make money off of doing something like this, and I'll give 3 examples of it. One, I've seen people buy a home that has a back house in the back, and they rent out that back house to someone else. And that actually all goes under the scope of one large mortgage, and the income that they get from the back house pays for like 80% of their mortgage. And so they pay for about 20% of living in their home, while the people behind them pay for the rest. And then they pay for the utilities, and they live comfortably based off of just one rental property in the back of their house. So that's crazy to think about. The other things I've seen is, if you're not a very fancy person, I've seen plenty of people who will buy a lot of properties and rent out these gorgeous homes, but then they themselves would rather live in a big city life. And so they live in a place like San Diego or Los Angeles, somewhere like that, where their homes aren't as big or luxurious, but they make enough to live there comfortably and enjoy their life, and they're renting out bigger homes, fancier homes somewhere else entirely, and they have someone else kind of maintaining the property. And that gives them the ability to live the big city life and the happy life. And then the third example is actually a little bit different, but I've seen people who will move to a new area And rather than just trying to buy a small home, they'll actually buy this large mansion-esque type of house and then turn that into essentially a residential care facility, so that way they can take care of the elderly or people who need help. And in turn, those people pay them for acting as caregivers and the room and the food and the supplies in order to be able to survive and live comfortably in their home instead. And that gives them the ability to pay off their mortgage significantly faster, and then by the end of it, instead of 30 years, it's significantly less than that, and they own this large, lavished mansion. So always keep in mind things like property taxes, but that one's sort of a clever way of being able to help someone else while also helping yourself quite a bit. So investment properties, fantastic idea. Even if you don't have any one that's significantly large or amazing, if you have several, they add up. And they're one of the most guaranteed ways to have a form of passive income that will sustain you, and they won't go anywhere or fold over like some of the other forms of passive income that you constantly hear about online through different ads or telemarketers. This is a solid way of doing it, and so it's one that I highly recommend. So that's it. That's the end of the video. I want to thank everyone for giving me questions again, and I want to thank everyone who's watched so far. Even if you only watched to a little bit and you're not at this point, just know that I am thankful if you watch this later, I guess. Or, you know what, just thank you in general. You don't have to actually see the fact that I'm saying thank you, just know that I'm grateful. And if you guys have any other questions, go ahead and just comment down below. I'll be happy to try to take those and maybe answer them later, if not, just answer them for you in the comments. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks everyone. Bye.